we can't count on the Americans to do anything. Totally unpredictable. He could turn around and say something different tomorrow, but there's no way that we can rely on the United States in this particular situation. If you look at what's been happening during the last 3 years, is that Europe has been doing an awful amount of support for Ukraine, which has been so far successful. I mean, Ukraine has been defending itself, and Russia has been advancing, that's true. They have got roughly 90% of the territory of Ukraine. They've been trying to destroy the energy infrastructure. They've been trying to destroy virtually everything else. But Ukraine is still standing. That is primarily due to the Ukrainians themselves, but the support from the United States, certainly, but primarily from Europe, has been important.
Well, just hearing from General McCall that it wouldn't be possible without the United States, though.
Yeah, well, perhaps not. The Americans have been important with some of the weapons, not that much on the financial side. Clearly, on the intelligence side, they've been important. Whether that can be replaced, well, it could, but it will take some time. Will it be more difficult for the Ukrainians without it? It would. But I don't think they would sort of fold and capitulate and leave over to the Kremlin. I think they would fight on, and I think they can fight on. I think most of the assessment that I hear is that they are, with all of the difficulties a war entails, they can fight this war as well, this year as well.
Do you think that's what's going to happen now, looking at what we're hearing from the Trump White House?
Yeah, I think that is more likely. I don't think any ceasefire is imminent. And we had this sort of horrible spectacle of turnaround US policies during the last few weeks and primarily the last few days. But we should also note that there has been no sign whatsoever of Kremlin making any sort of concessions or having any interest in any ceasefire. So far, the Russians seems to be intending to fight on.
So, and what do you make of what Donald Trump has said about gambling with World War III and about saying, you know, if you don't do what I want, you'll be on your own? Do you take that threat seriously?
Well, I think Donald Trump is a profoundly unserious person, but I fear that what we'll have to take his unseriousness serious in the sense that he's unreliable. It could be anything. I mean, we can't count on the Americans to do anything. Totally unpredictable. He could turn around and say something different tomorrow, but there's no way that we can rely on the United States in this particular situation. We will have to hope for the best, absolutely. If things go back to normal, fine, we can applaud. But we have to prepare for the worst. And the worst is that it's the Trump and the J.D. Vance that we saw in the Oval Office the other day, which is another reality for Europe.
Your country, Sweden, has stepped forward and joined NATO, moving from a position of neutrality. But we've got Elon Musk today, again on social media, saying the United States should leave NATO and the United Nations. Do you take any of that seriously?
Well, a good question. I don't know anything. I don't think anyone has ever left the United Nations, to my knowledge. I don't even know if there are any provisions for leaving the United Nations, and I'm quite certain that Elon Musk doesn't know either. Will that happen? I don't think that will happen. I don't think they will leave NATO either. But the fact that we have these sentiments, totally unserious, in or around the Oval Office is, of course, a source of uncertainty is the most diplomatic term I can use.
And do you see the United Kingdom as a key pivotal figure that could keep the Western alliance together, given its relations both with Europe and the United States?
Well, the United Kingdom is a key actor in itself. I mean, it's a key security partner for us in Northern Europe, but for Europe as a whole. I mean, it would have been better inside the EU, obviously, but it's a key member of NATO. We've had long-standing good relationship with the UK in the security field, defence field, and that's been strengthened with its joint expeditionary force in the structures and exercises in the last few years. So clearly, the UK is important. The meeting that is going to happen in a few hours' time in London will be an important one. And there might well be a continuation of that in the new situation that we are now facing.
And would you be in favour that there's talk of pooling resources and having some kind of central defense fund for Europe, including having purchasing power and concentrating that purchasing power within Europe. Do you think that's the way to go?
Yeah, let's see. There are proposals of that sort on the table. I think it's fairly obvious that there's going to be a need for substantially increased funding for defense in X numbers of European countries. Whether that should be done by a bank or fund or increased taxation or debt, or I leave that to the financial architects to decide what is the best. I'm a slightly old-fashioned guy when it comes to managing state finances. If we should increase expenditure, which is clearly going to be necessary here, I think over time we need to increase taxes as well to finance that. And in the meantime, if you don't have a bank or fund or debt, fine. But at the end of the day, there's no way around taxes.
That's the big question, though, isn't it? Do you feel now that the European public is prepared, including the UK, is really prepared to see its taxes go up to defend itself?
I don't know, but I think we're clearly heading in that direction. I think there is, when I look at reactions in Sweden, I happen to be in Italy at the moment, when I see reactions here, there's great worries among public opinion in Europe and readiness to do things. And whether that will be, what that will be translated into remains to be seen. But clearly increased defense spending, and at the end of the day, increases in spending will have to be paid. And at the end of the day, even if you take a debt or a bank or whatever, at the end of the day, it's taxes anyhow. Deferred taxes, but still taxes.
I just want to pick up what you were saying earlier about the comparative contribution of various countries. I mean, it is pretty much beyond denial that in terms of spending in support of Ukraine, that the United States is the biggest single nation, isn't it?
They might be the single biggest nation, but if you make the comparison between the Europeans and the Americans, the Europeans are bigger. And we shouldn't forget that there are a lot of others. Japan, to take one example, has been a substantial contributor. The Americans have been significant primarily on the military side in the initial stages. But I think even on the military side, the Europeans are now at the same level or even higher. I don't know.
So when Donald Trump says that the Europeans have spent $100 million and at various times he said $350 billion or even $500 billion, is that accurate?
Well, nearly nothing that he says is accurate. And I think President Macron tried to give him the right figures. It had no effect whatsoever, because I saw that President Trump continued with wrong figures anyhow. I don't think that anyone who has been looked at the figures doubt that the Europeans have been spending more than the Americans, which is very appropriate. That's the way it should be. It's a conflict in Europe. It affects our security interest in a very fundamental way.
And how strategic is it that Ukraine should survive this conflict as a sovereign nation? And should it also survive as someone who has commitments on joining NATO?
Well, the security of Europe in the future is decided by what happens with Ukraine today or in sort of the immediate future. Were Ukraine to be sort of conquered by Russia, then we have a fundamentally changed security situation in Europe. Whether Russia would march on to somewhere else, the risk is clearly going to be there. With a highly militarized economy and with victory having been achieved in Ukraine, I think Central and Eastern Europe will be in profound danger, and that will affect every single European country. If we are able to defend Ukraine as a sovereign, independent country, gradually integrating the West as it wants to do, then I think the strategic options for Russia is going to be very limited. That will be, in fact, a strategic defeat for Mr. Putin. And what consequences that will have for the domestic development of Russia is difficult to know. But clearly, he will be very constrained